Hello, Jessica. We had Jessica join us.
Hi, Jessica.
Shannon knows her. And Alex, I think you've met Jessica too.
I believe so.
There we go. All right, a couple more people. I'll go ahead and say hello because nobody really cares about me. They care about you guys. So,
that's true.
okay, guys, welcome to our panel with our fellow Orlando journalists that you know and love. They'll introduce themselves here in a second, but I'm Ashley Moore. I am the founder of a boutique agency in town called AM Public Relations. We work with a lot of technology clients. And also, as a part of Digital Orlando, we're launching a new resource for startups primarily called PR Breakthrough Bootcamp. So make sure to pop over to our virtual booth. There is a launch offer for you that involves free strategy sessions as well as 40% off. If you use the launch 40 is the promo code for you guys. So again, you can find out more information over in our virtual booth, and I'll put the code here in the chat too. But we're here today to talk to these three guys about what's going on in the media landscape, allow you to ask your questions about their jobs, their publications, the news that they like to cover, how to work with them. So I'm going to go ahead and let Shannon start by introducing herself.
Oh, I'm so sorry. My dog just started barking.
Everybody loves animals, so that's all right.
Hi, my name is Shannon Delaney. I'm a planning editor at News 13. What that means is I plan the day-to-day coverage along with long-term. An example for long-term right now is what our special production is going to look like for the Crew 1 mission launch, which is expected to take flight November 14th. So with that, just planning what stories our reporters are going to be turning, what our on-air looks like. We're going to be having a special show for 4 hours leading up to the launch. And then we also just have to make sure that all of our crews are in place and also just paying attention to the trends. So that's kind of a summary of what my job is like at News 13.
Great. Alex?
Yeah. So, hey, y'all. My name is Alex Soderstrom. I'm the technology reporter at the Orlando Business Journal. And, if you're not aware, OBJ is a business news website with a weekly print publication. So what my job entails is essentially, both kind of, daily breaking news stories, really around business deals, businesses that are growing, trends, as well as kind of, some longer, kind of Q&As and kind of business intelligence and insight, things that help, anyone who's the manager, business owner, that sort of thing, kind of make better decisions. I also, not really related to this panel, but I also cover residential real estate. So if anyone out there is involved in that industry too, love to connect on that as well.
Awesome. And that leaves Marco.
Yeah, so I'm Marco Santana. I was a journalist for 11 years in Illinois and Florida. The last 6 years was as a tech reporter at the Orlando Sentinel. And before that, I was a tech reporter in the Midwest, so I've been covering tech for a while. And right now I'm running a website called OrlandoTechNews.com. Which is kind of like a startup, I guess, but so just trying to keep the spotlight on Orlando's tech community and tech companies as well. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here. I want to start. I'll throw questions for you each to answer, each one. But I want to start by just getting the lay of land because I feel like obviously things are crazy right now in the news cycle. We need to get past election week here. So, COVID's on the mind, elections on the mind, but outside of that stuff or working within that, what are the most important things that, that people should understand about the media right now, what you're focused on, what the future is going to be, how some of those things have impacted it? I'll start with Alex.
Yeah, well, like you said, Ashley, I think that COVID, especially the pandemic, has kind of permeates everything, both in how news operates, and then both in terms of kind of the stories we're watching. I would say that probably one of the biggest things to understand, and I think most people kind of figure this out just by the way they live, what's going on in their own lives and their own businesses. But very early on, the pandemic was, the questions and the stories and the coverage was very much centered, especially for us, or at least around, kind of how are people operating right now? What have they had to change? And around just a lot of very sudden shifts and pivots. That kind of stuff has kind of now just become kind of just stuff, almost, and that's just kind of the way things happen so fast with this. But now everyone's kind of settled into that. So I think it's definitely become more forward looking, kind of the changes you've had to make because of COVID isn't necessarily the biggest story, but more of, how do you think your business, your industry is going to be impacted for the next year or even further than that out. And I say that just because I still get a lot of pitches about, even now where people are saying, oh, well, our business has, here's how we've kind of pivoted to shift to remote work. And there still probably are some really good stories and some things there, but, it's kind of like everyone at this point who was going to go remote has had to do that. So, now it's more looking at, are you completely, trying to get out of your lease, or you're not going to resign your lease and get new office space. That's just an example thrown out there, but I would just say for us, the biggest thing to understand is that we've really settled into kind of COVID, just exists, and the way businesses, operate has changed. So now the question more is, what does that mean for the next, year, 2 years, or further out?
Awesome. That's really helpful. And everyone keep in mind, I am learning too, just as much from these guys in this moment for my day job. So thank you, Alex. Shannon, you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, jumping off of what Alex mentioned, the fact that the initial shock of COVID and the pandemic has passed. Now with pitching, we want to know the impact. We know what coronavirus is. We know the shift that companies, parents, teachers had to make to start working from home. But now we really want to see what the effect looks like and the long-term effect. So that's kind of how we have changed our storytelling. And I think another thing would be, if you are a business that is looking for the airtime for whatever your company may be doing, I think you just also need to make yourself available. Originally, people turned to virtual, which is perfect. And I don't see that going away anytime soon for virtual interviews. But if you are in the Orlando area, we also want to be able to see who you are and put a face to the story. So that way, especially coming from a local TV standpoint, we need that visual to be able to tell the stories for what's coming up next and what that impact looks like.
And I'm sure you guys are figuring out, you've kind of established a way to safely do that, make your experts and resources feel comfortable.
Yes, it's definitely been a change for TV, just because originally pre-pandemic, we did all of our interviews in person. We really never did anything virtually. We would do sat interviews from every time to time, but now that's what we really rely on. And I'm the producer for our in-depth segment, and all of our in-depths now are virtual. And it's definitely been a change and a transition, but I think we're now in a place where we can do it, and we can do it successfully. And I think companies need to see what's going on and be more open to these types of interviews too.
Yeah, great. Marco, what do you have to add in about that?
I think more to the question of what the media landscape looks like right now is that as an entrepreneur, as a startup or a company, you really are the media now. With today's technology and all of the apps that are available for you, oftentimes you don't really need a media person to pick up your story to go viral, so to speak. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs almost, instinctively think they have to pitch to someone like us, and we appreciate it. But in today's world, it really is, the landscape's changed so much because you do have access to a lot of tools that in the past were exclusively the media's, not property, but you know what I mean. So really, the media is you. Build a relationship with the reporters around town, and don't pitch your story, pitch a trend. Those are the three things that I think in today's media landscape you should really remember.
Yeah, and those things, you just have to kind of adjust them with say the pandemic, but make the relationships, tell a good story is nothing new, right? Mm-hmm. So what is your favorite, if you had to pick a storytelling avenue for a brand right now that's not traditional media, what would you pick?
Well, I think there are different strategies for different social media platforms. I think it depends on the company and what your personality is. I guess is the way I'd say it. I think Instagram is great, but you have to have someone on your team that understands that these things change, things evolve. So you have to have someone who's able to evolve with these platforms. Even Facebook has its place, even though it's kind of like the old dog, so to speak. So I think there really are different strategies for different social media platforms. But I think the key thing that you have to remember at all times is it does come back to storytelling and telling the good stories that you have, and you have to just find them from you have to find the stories in your company that I know are there, and then find the right way to share them.
Yeah, awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about tech specifically. What technology trends are you following closely? I know, Shannon, you kind of hinted on some stuff coming up here for you guys in a couple weeks, but what are you following most closely from a regional and local standpoint? And then what are you following from a national standpoint that you're looking to localize, or you're just interested in, even if you haven't figured out that angle yet?
So one thing that we started paying attention to once the pandemic started would definitely be the rise in telemedicine. And I definitely don't see that disappearing or going away anytime soon. Another thing that I personally, locally, am paying attention to would just be autonomous vehicles because of what we have going on in Lake Nona. I think it's great that Beep right now, during a pandemic, is expanding and also adding additional jobs. And I think that that's huge for our area. And then on a national level, but also local, would probably be augmented reality. And just, I'm starting to see, at least for our side of TV production, just seeing a few more companies utilizing it. So you have Brevard Zoo, and you also have the Orlando Science Center that has a new exhibit, and they're using AR for that. And also, just the fact that retailers have hit a huge roadblock once the pandemic started and stores started closing because they weren't essential. And you're starting to see that switch and that transition to AR to try and stay afloat during this time.
Interesting. Yeah. Marco, what are you following?
I think the main thing regionally is I'm super interested to see how sensors evolve in Kissimmee. I think with the Bridge Research Facility, it's had its up and downs, and we don't have to go into the details there. But I think what I'm curious is to see how they pull that off, because I really believe if they establish that facility down there, it could be a game changer. And I hate that term, but it's something that has a big impact on the region's reputation. I mean, I think we already have a reputation for, of course, theme parks. And if you look at our more local reputation, there is a little bit of a startup scene, a tech scene. You look at EA and that kind of stuff. But I think this could be another avenue that kind of builds the tech community a lot stronger than we are now. So I mean, I think you only ask for locally, right?
Well, and nationally, that you think can be relevant locally.
Well, I think mixed reality. With gaming, gaming is a huge thing right now. Because not because I think we can become a video game hub, though I do believe that. But I think when you look at AR, VR, and mixed reality, that is applicable to so many different industries, right? If we perfect it or we do well here in that avenue, I mean, who knows what kind of industries we can attract to this region. So I think when you look at the national impact of gaming and the AR and VR, that's just a start, because I think we have a lot of companies here that are already dabbling in it that I think could emerge pretty strongly. And sorry about my figuring head.
Yeah, someone said they think you're in a simulation.
I sometimes feel like I am, but.
Okay, if it makes more sense to turn your camera back off and then on, feel free to try. But it looks cool, so keep it going. Alex, what are you following?
Yeah. Yes to everything that Marco and Shannon said. All of those are certainly on the radar. The big one that I'm looking at is cybersecurity, and that was something that was already huge and growing before the pandemic, just as a result of the way basically like almost essentially every business operates now. But more and more people, and even there's even data to show this, that working remotely, that it's becoming more of a concern, or at least people are even have to kind of overhaul their cybersecurity protocols and that sort of thing, as there are some people working remotely, some people working at home, that kind of thing. And then the other interesting thing about cyber is, right now there's essentially the DoD is instituting a new kind of, I guess you call it like protocol or requirement that's slowly being introduced. So if you're a defense contractor, someone said CMMC, exactly. So if you're a defense contractor, you basically are going to eventually have to meet that, if not now, pretty soon, to bid on contracts. And what's interesting in that is a lot of people in the cybersecurity space, have kind of said that, that's a concept that will likely, bleed over into other industries as well. Where larger companies that contract work out to smaller companies are, if they don't already have them, going to have probably stricter and stricter cybersecurity regulations, which I think will be interesting to see. Trying to think, that was probably my last big one to add. I think that I definitely think that gaming is huge, but I don't want to go too much into that because Marco's kind of knowledge and expertise, I think, runs much deeper than mine. But we've seen so much growth there. I think obviously the simulation industry that kind of already existed and has existed for a long time, just makes it that much more likely that probably will continue to grow. Gaming and AI and VR.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So this kind of, someone brings up jobs in the chat, and you guys have hit on the economic side of stories. So I want to jump down to a question we have in here about, in addition to the technology angle, what other angles or storylines are important to you guys? Is it that it creates jobs, or some sort of business and economic angle comes first? Is it a human interest angle? What else do they need to be presenting?
Can you hear me yet? Okay, by the way?
I can hear you okay. You can start with that one if you want to, Marco.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think to me, what is interesting to me is humans. The tech stories are just that, they're tech stories. But I think every tech story should be a human-based tech story. I think what you need to do with whatever you're doing, whether you have a small company or startup, or you have a big company, you have to illustrate to a reporter, I believe, that how it affects the residents of Orlando, for example, if you're playing local, and how your app can help someone in certain industries. I think the main thing that I'm looking for is, as much as I am proud of you as a startup and a company for launching something, I want to know how it's going to affect the citizens, also known as our readers, our viewers. Like that's we want to get the story so that we can tell them why this is important or why it's a big deal. So that's kind of my big approach, is put a human face on a tech story.
Mm-hmm. Shannon.
So jumping off of what Marco just said, we like to build our stories around what we call characters. So it would be, yes, the business impact and the personal value to it. But for example, I had just talked about autonomous vehicles. If you as a company would be able to provide us someone who takes advantage of these services, and this helps them get from point A to point B, and we can wrap our story around them, that way it gives our viewers some value to the story, and they might be able to connect better to what we are reporting. So any real story, even if it's a great idea, we still need that character to sort of drive that story on air. And that's really what we try to do for every single story that we tell at News 13. And then on top of that is just, yes, economic impact, human interest are definitely up there, but the character is also what would need to be presented in the pitch.
Okay. Alex.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think obviously every kind of publication and outlet is different. I would say we definitely kind of
and that's important for you that you obviously are coming from a different position. So
right. I think you definitely heard Shannon and Marco. There are kind of some unique kind of factors there, and for us, for the Business Journal, there certainly is too. For us, I mean, really the first question that's asked, and by me, but more importantly by my editor, who decides, ultimately what runs and doesn't, is, what impact or what opportunities does this create for a business owner or just a business professional in the Central Florida area. So obviously local is always the most important, immediate opportunities and kind of economic or business impact. So, obviously if, your company is growing, expanding, adding jobs, adding more physical space or something like that, that's always a huge one. On top of that, just providing any kind of insight or using your own kind of experiences to inform other business owners, entrepreneurs. And so, whether that's, I mean, it can be a range of things, but, I know like during the early days of the pandemic, the word, pivot, you couldn't go 5 minutes without hearing someone talking about pivoting. And so many, startups and tech companies are saying, oh, well, we can kind of change what we're doing a little bit to address a need during the pandemic. And some companies did really well with that. But, I know like one story we did was talking to a couple companies about, some that did, and more importantly, others that didn't, and just kept working with what they're doing. So really for those companies, nothing is really different. They're not any bigger than they were before, but what was useful was the insight they gave of here's kind of the considerations we took. Here's kind of the questions we asked ourselves about why we should or shouldn't kind of alter our business plan, which for us, that's something we think will be, could be useful to a lot of readers. And then outside of just a story, in terms of, kind of getting, yourself and your company featured, really important is just kind of establishing yourself as an expert. We always, and this is true of, most stories, is even if we're covering another company that's doing something, we like to have kind of someone who's unaffiliated, but is in that field, in that industry, who can kind of just provide some kind of bigger context. So even if, and obviously when you do that in the story, it'll say, said so-and-so who's, with this company that does this, and that gives yourself, exposure, but more importantly, obviously, signals that, you are an expert, your company is, well established and well versed in this field. So I think those are probably the things that, we prioritize when we're looking for what to do a story about or who to include, in those stories.
I think I want to jump on what Alex said. I think what's important though, is that work starts before the pandemic starts, right? Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is you have to establish that relationship with the local journalists. Whether it's going to grab coffee, which I had a lot of coffee with sources over the years, and I think you have to get on their radar first, and then you have to come through. I think there are a few steps, and once you come through a couple times, I mean you're top of mind when it comes to these journalists whenever a certain topic comes up. So I think Alex made a great point, but it does all start with long before you're ever needed. You should be establishing a relationship with your local journalists and local outlets that you want to be featured in eventually.
Sure.
And jumping off of what Marco and Alex just said is, yes, you definitely need to build that relationship. I always ask people if they're willing to be on my speed dial. So if there's some sort of event taking place, are you interested and willing to be woken up in the middle of the night, early morning, just to take a phone call in case we need some sort of expert soundbite for our coverage? And I think that that's a conversation that you should be having early on, just to make sure that both of you are on the same page and that's what you're both looking for.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to your point about being available. Mm-hmm. You've got the media runs on a cycle that is very hard to keep up with, and there's a lot of news to cover, and people need to be available. They need to be willing to work within your timelines and deliver, So, and obviously so my side of the business, we call what you're talking about thought leadership. So, offering you as an expert source on something that's less promotional about what your business is doing specifically. Outside of taking you to coffee virtually now or in person, what are other ways that you feel like, what are ways you enjoy connecting with the people that give you stories? How else can they be getting on your radar for that? Is it just emailing you some tips every now and then? What do you think? So you can start, Shannon.
I would say emails are great, but for me, I'm part of the assignment desk at News 13, so I get probably 700 emails a day. So your email might get lost in the mix with everything that's going on. Probably the best way is just check in with me through calling or texting. I'm very accessible on my cell phone, and I end up just texting people if they have a story idea or they're trying to they have an idea, but it hasn't really come total yet. So they are just checking out to see if this is something that we might even be interested in doing, whether for an in-depth or for a reporter package. And I think once you build that relationship, the conversation is much more free and you're able to give honest feedback. Especially, I've met a few people through the pandemic. We've done virtual calls just to check in, see what types of business they do and what they could be offering for their expertise. And then I just give them the lay of the land of what News 13 coverage looks like. Because we are a 24-hour local news station here in the Orlando market. So that gives us a lot of opportunities to sort of get those stories out. We aren't restricted to our shows. And then once the show is done, it's done because we have our wheel system. So I think you just need to build that relationship and get their cell phone number, because once you have their cell phone number, that communication becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. And before I let Alex and Marco chime in, I know our team does that on the agency side with you a lot. It's, how often does some idea start rolling because you get these conversations going with people? It's like, I maybe came to you with one thing, kind of unsure how you might feel about it, and it sparks something else for you.
Yeah, that happens a lot. And even if with just having a regular conversation, I talk to people all the time about something and they just mention one detail. In my head, it's like, that's really interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, is it just you that's affected by that, or are other people dealing with the same situation? And it sort of starts steamrolling because you get a better idea that there could be even a completely different story out there for us to cover. But I definitely think that just bouncing ideas off of one another and getting to know what people are comfortable with talking about, I think that that's the best way to develop these relationships with local media.
Awesome. Alex, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say that just like Shannon, email. I definitely get a lot of pitches through emails, and I try to respond to all of them. That backs up pretty quickly. I'm sure most people are familiar how it is with email. So yeah, calling and texting me is good. Calling is obviously the other thing too is I'll be able to pick up right away, but I definitely will get back to you if you leave me a voicemail. So texting is kind of the nice in between spots. I don't get nearly as many texts obviously as email, and then I can kind of either shoot you a text back or give you a call back. And make sure, hopefully I won't forget before this is over, I'll put my contact info in the chat. It doesn't have it. But anyway, the other thing I would say is events like this are huge, and obviously in the pre-pandemic world, I made a point, and that's one of the great things about kind of the tech and startup industries here is there were so many great events happening all the time and meetups and stuff, and we go to those a lot, and so if there were, just to obviously connect with sources that I talk to a lot, or to meet new people. And so if you are going to those things, that's a great way to bump into, or reach out beforehand and say, hey, I'm going to be at this event. Are you going to be there? If so, we'll grab a couple minutes just to chat. Obviously, so much of that got put on hold, but I'm glad to see stuff like with this virtual Digital Orlando, and there's a virtual Florida Simulation Summits today as well. So we're seeing some of these events come back virtually, and hopefully hopefully more of that. The drive-in pitch night that Starter Studio and Project Orlando did. So as those things come back, I'm hoping to be at more of those. So if you're trying to run into me, that's a good way to do it too.
Awesome. Marco, we've gotten coffee. Any other creative ideas you want to throw out?
So, I think Alex is right, is spot on, and Shannon, both. Text message is the way. If you have my cell phone number, there's a reason I gave it to you. Because I want you to reach out to me when you have something that you might be newsworthy, right? Don't send me donuts with a pitch. Don't send me, and I've had that in the newsroom where people send these things, and I'm like, donuts don't make your pitch more interesting. It's just interesting. Have an interesting story to do. If you need to use email, I don't care how creative you are. I don't care how you put these flowery language at the top. I would be more inclined to respond to an email that is 3 bullet points at the top that says, here are the 3 newsworthy things about this story, and then go ahead and go into your formal pitch. Than someone who I've seen this where they get 6-7 drafts into the pitch before I know what the hell they're pitching. And that's a product of, again, we're getting pitched by so many people that if you are bullet pointed or you are direct in what you're trying to tell me, you're more likely to get on my radar than if you're trying to write a novel. So I think those are the main things that drove me my decision making process, especially as Alex said, you get bombarded by emails, and Shannon said you get bombarded by emails all day, every day.
Yeah. And just jumping off of that really quickly from what Marco said with the paragraphs, I think if you're going to have a planned event now, just because things are open, you should have the who, what, where, when, why at the top of your email. And then if you want to have the paragraphs with the full detail of the pitch, that's perfectly fine. But put the meat of the email at the top, so that way it's easier for us to see, because that way we can better understand exactly what this entire email is trying to say and trying to pitch to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and let's talk about some pitch tips, because I think one of the things that companies and brands attending this event, when we look at some of the startup community, at least in Orlando, and what we get approached about on the agency side is launching a product. So I want to talk specifically about those launching some sort of product or offering. How important is the element of new to that storyline? What other things do you look for? I know we talked about the human interest angle. A lot of times when things are new, they don't necessarily have that yet. Some of the proof points we're talking about may not exist. So what are ways that you've found to tell those stories, or that have still made those stories interesting to you? Alex, I'll throw that one to you first.
Right. Yeah. For us, again, it comes back to, it's not as much about your company as much as, every other company here in Central Florida. So, is your product launching? Is it going to, is it offering a solution that's, really, going to make it really easier for some companies, and is it really fitting a need that's honestly fairly urgent? And so, we probably don't do a lot of stories on kind of new products and services. But I would say that especially, with the onset of the pandemic, there have been probably a few more we've done, just because you kind of overnight had businesses trying to find, solutions to problems they never really thought they would have had. So, I would say, that is certainly for us, the priority is, is it really going to offer an accessible and workable solution for a lot of other businesses, in Central Florida?
Okay. Marco?
I think the product launch pitches that were ever successful in my time as a reporter were the ones that, first of all, obviously, tell me what problem you're solving, right? What, and then is it a definable problem where people who have this problem? Pitch the people. Again, it goes back to my original, thesis, if you want to call it that. But I want to know how this is going to affect somebody. If you're launching a product, I don't even care if it's like a small little widget. If there is someone with a compelling story that really needs this product, that's going to be a lot more successful than just an email saying, I have this pitch and you should cover me because I'm local, which I've had before, by the way. So it is about timing, and it is about finding a way to make a story interesting. And I do think there is this almost automatic belief that because you're creating something, everyone's going to be interested in it, and so the news should be interested in it. But you're competing with a lot of other pitches, and so you have to stand out. And you don't stand out by saying, "I'm sorry, you're not." You stand out by saying, here's this person who's going to be, whose problems are solved because of this app that I'm creating, and you should write about me because of that. So, I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Shannon, anything to add into that?
Yeah, I would say adding just on top of all of that, I agree that you need to understand how it's going to help the community. And also just from a TV side, again, is just the viewer value. What do our viewers gain by watching a story on whatever this launch up and startup might be? Because it might not resonate home to most of our viewers. It might be just a very small portion. Mm-hmm. And I think that in our newsroom meetings that we have probably 3 just for content. And we start talking about what do our viewers gain by this story. And that's something that we constantly have to remind ourselves about.
Yeah. And we're talking about viewers and we're also talking about audience in the chat here. So maybe give everybody who's in here just a reminder about what is the ideal persona for your reader, because you're all very different.
So for News 13, we're kind of everything. We cover all different types of stories. We are covering Central Florida, 24-hour local news station, and there isn't really one topic that we wouldn't touch on just because we're so broad. And I would say, which I sort of touched on, what makes us different compared to other news stations in the market would be that we are 24 hours and we have a wheel system. So if you do an interview with someone, it might only air in the 5 o'clock show. But for us, it would be airing from 5 p.m. until probably 10 p.m. or maybe the next morning. And I think that gives you the opportunity for the FaceTime that you might be looking for.
Yeah.
But there aren't many things that we stray away from.
Yeah. Marco, what about Orlando Tech News?
Well, I think the name of it is very specific. So if it's Orlando Tech, I want to know about it. And I think that goes from whether you're a small startup that has 3 people and is hiring 1 person, I want to know about that. Or if you're Lockheed Martin landing millions of dollars in contracts, I want to know about that. I think so. Right now it's pretty wide. However, if I look back to the Orlando Sentinel, I think a good tip for people is to find the people that would be interested in it, because they have a just like OBJ and then also Shannon's. Certain people have specific beats, and if you find the person, even if you have a tech story, if it's food tech, look for the food critic, or what I mean. And I think that's the more people you can get in front of that are relevant, right? Because if you start pitching irrelevant people, then you get blacklisted, basically. But the more people that you can get in front of that might be interested in your news, the more chance you have of successfully getting covered. So I think it's a matter of defining the right audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alex, we talked a little bit about the business focus here, but anything else you want to throw into the ideal persona for your reader?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of hit on it again, but it still varies some. But yeah, I mean, the ideal readers and typically what we see is certainly either a business owner or someone kind of in management or someone who is trying to start their own business, launch their own business. But I'm sure I know I've talked to people who that doesn't necessarily describe them, but just because of their interest, they're part of the tech community in one way or the other, they're interested as well. But I think it generally comes back to people who are looking at the Business Journal to help them just become informed to make decisions and what they're doing in their business. So they kind of typically would be at the level where they have some influence on the trajectory of the business. And I had something to add to what Marco said. It just slipped my mind, so I'm sure it'll come back when we're talking about something completely different. So we'll
throw it back in there. Okay.
Coronavirus, man. That's all good.
I'm gonna throw to Jessica's question here in a second, but I just want to ask you guys, and you can take a second to think about this. But so whoever has their idea first, just chime in. But can you walk us briefly through a time where you actually got a great pitch? You were like, this is a great story, but you couldn't do it. It couldn't come to fruition. Something about it couldn't come together. Like, what was that scenario? I want people to, we talk so much about bad pitches. So I want people to understand too, sometimes there are good stories that don't work out. So can you think of a situation or an example to give the viewers?
I can jump in on that. So we've gotten a lot of great pitches, especially with the tech community, but I would say sometimes they don't offer us to go behind the scenes to really get the video that we need. Because we're a TV station, we need the visuals. We need behind the scenes, something that we can layer over while telling and doing our storytelling. But a lot of companies are so high secure that they won't allow outsiders to come in to get the video that we're looking for. And they do rebuttal by providing VNR video news releases. But our company, we are not allowed to use anything because we didn't create or control the video that's being provided. So I think when you have a pitch and you are offering video, we are most likely going to follow up with saying, can we come in and shoot our own video? And there are plenty of times that they have said, no, we just can't do the story because we aren't able to gather our own elements for the piece. And I think if you're a company, you should always be thinking, how can we get them in to either take pictures or take their own video to help tell that story?
It's helpful.
Yeah, somewhat related to that, I think, is stories. There have been multiple times where I get a really good pitch for a story, but then there's not the access that I want, and where you'll have this and looking back on it, phenomenal pitch, good information, good email, everything is where it should be, and then when I call, all you offer up is the PR representative, or even. To be honest, even a chief marketing, right? I'm talking about, I want I want as high up the ladder as I can get, because that to me is a more real conversation than somebody who's frankly paid to tell me how great everything is. So I think that to me is one of the things where oftentimes I would I'd have this story, I'd actually run it by my manager, he'd be okay with it, but then I'd come back and be like, hey Mark, or whoever my was at the time, we don't, then I can list CO, and we just got it. We have a lot of other options, frankly, and that's I think that's bad practice, but so that's something that you should, if you can learn from anything, I hope you learn from that.
Yeah, it's great insight on the spokesperson, Alex.
Yeah. It kind of in a similar vein with what both Shannon and Marco said. Obviously, OBJ is primarily print and online, so video is not as big of a component. But kind of our version of that is sort of the details and especially numbers. And so I've had a lot of pitches about people whose company is growing. Blah, blah, blah. And so it seemed like a really good story because they've got this kind of cool tech business. It's growing, they say. And then when you kind of contact them, they don't want to talk about, how many employees they have. They don't want to talk about revenue and blah, blah, blah. And, obviously, that's anyone's prerogative. But I would just say that, any numbers that you will share, even if it comes down to just, revenue growth as a percentage instead of giving dollar amounts. That's much more likely for us to do a story, because it's hard for us to write a story and just say, this business has grown in the last year, and it's like, what does that mean? Is it bigger? Is it more profitable? Are sales up? That sort of thing. The other one is geographic reasons. I've had great stories pitched that are For us, we're very, very specific. I mean, if it's happening in Orange, Osceola, Seminole, or Lake, you're golden. Volusia and Brevard, we do stuff as well, but the threshold might be just a little higher because it's a little further away. And outside of that, we generally really don't ever do it. And I've had great stories in Polk, and beg my editor, like, can we do this? And they're like, we just because we have so many other stories to get to, it's like we can't forsake the person who's closer, and then it, I don't know, we just try to stick to those counties. So that stuff as well. So if the company's doing something, or if you're based just outside of the Orlando market, you might have to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
Real quick, Alex, about data makes stories real.
Yeah.
Like if you give us data, we know that there's it's always like a proof of what you're saying instead of just trying to.
Yeah, and even for TV, data is awesome. And we launched a new app in the midst of the pandemic, and we're now utilizing all of that data to push to the app. So that information that you provide, even if it doesn't make it into the reporter package, it would still be either online or utilized on the app for people to learn more about the company.
Yeah, cool. All great points. Let's get to a question we have kind of on the data front. So obviously pitching and storytelling is an art. It's subjective at the end of the day, but people always want to nail down like open rate and send time and things like that with reporters. So is there anything about email pitching that is strategic outside of, you guys talked about like laying out some bullet points, keeping things concise, but like, is there anything to say about what you do choose to open and what you don't outside of, the person's name already? Anything to throw in there? Time of day, any of that stuff?
I have people that email me directly, and in the subject in all caps, it will be my name, and then they'll go into what the title might be just to grab my attention. And I think it always catches my eye because it's just in your face. Shannon, look at this. So that works. I tend to pay attention to those emails. And for time of day, I would say between 10 a.m. and 11:30, and then between 1 p. and 3:30 are probably the best times to send emails, at least in our newsroom, because noon, we have our noon show, and then anything leading up to the 5 p.m. gets a little hectic and might get lost within emails. But I think those two time frames are definitely helpful because there's sort of a lull before the shows, and it gives us more time to start going through our emails and catching up.
Cool.
Yeah. I would just jump in and, for me, in terms of time, so I have at OBJ, all the reporters meet their managing editor at 9:30 every morning. And so that's our pitch meeting. And, we basically say, here are the stories that we're doing today, and here's the headlines, and we get all that okayed. And then basically from that point on, it's expected for that to be done by like 5. So, I'm generally just in working mode. And so unless it's writing or doing calls with sources, I'm generally am putting everything else on the back burner. So if your emails come then, which I know is like obviously most of the day, but it's more likely that I'll push it off and then maybe forget. So if you get me before, between, probably 7:30 and 9:30, that's when I'm generally trying to figure out, if, trying to get in most of my kind of just reporting and research and that kind of stuff for the rest of the day. So that's a good time to catch me. And then, after 5, generally I'm doing less, but, depending when if it's too much later, I might, depending on how busy the day is, if I wrap stuff up and don't have much else to do, I might unplug. So you might not get me till the next morning. And then, I think that one thing to add is, if it comes to subject line, obviously there's only so much room you can fit there for the reporter to see. The name of your company is awesome. Honestly, even what your company does, but that is less important to try to put in the subject than what the news is. So if it's growth, if it's expansion, if it's tips for other people, that kind of stuff. And that is the stuff you want to put in, and then put it in the actual email, who you are and what your company does. But those are the things that'll catch you more than just saying, company X that does this, and then the rest of it kind of trails off, and I miss it.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I think they covered that pretty well. But I think anytime after like 5 is just a no go, unless it's really super breaking news from UCF on a Friday afternoon. That's probably the only thing you're going to get reception for. And but when it comes to the title of your email, I think they did it right. If you have something that catches your eye, definitely put it up there. However, I will add that if you give me a good subject line and I go in there and it's a shit pitch, I'm not gonna never again open your email. But to me anyway, I had a few people who I would not open their pitches unless there was slow day, because I think it's a matter of deception. I don't want to be deceived. If you have something interesting, great, put it into the subject line. I open it, and if there's some delivery, perfect. But if it is something that ends up being really irrelevant, that's kind of when to me there's red flags. So that's personal.
Sure.
Ashley, I actually have a question for both of them, and also sort of an answer just from News 13. So Alex and Marco, when do you guys need to have your story ideas in by? So for News 13, our reporters have to have their pitches in by 4 p.m. the day before to make sure that everything is really set up. So when are you supposed to present your pitch, and when is it due by?
Well, I use whatever the hell I want because it's mine. But But at the Sentinel, however, it was a matter of we have a running budget. We have a running budget where you just update it constantly, and then whenever you add something else, you tell your editor. But as far as the daily pieces, it would be early afternoon, so the editors could take a look at it, edit it, and get it ready for the next day's print.
Okay. Yeah. For us, like I said, generally by 9:30 is when the pitches for that rest of the day are due, and then it's kind of a rolling thing where we typically we're supposed to have 3 online stories every day for the web. So and then generally it'll be first one generally be around noon, then 2:30, and then the last one before 5 o'clock.
And then you guys are obviously for print working on your print deadline.
Right. Yeah. I'll just say for us, obviously, our weekly edition comes out every Friday. So the print deadline for that is actually the Wednesday before. And, the print, obviously, the focus for us, since it's weekly, is less on breaking news, more, kind of analysis, insight. What does this news of the week mean, sort of thing, and adding just some depth and layers to it. So I mean, I would say for us, don't be surprised if it, takes almost an extra week, just because our deadlines are kind of so spread out for print.
I would say a couple things for the dailies, the daily deadline. If you're trying to get your story in, and it's you probably want it in there by morning. If this is an answer for startups or entrepreneurs that are watching, you want your pitches in by the morning. But yeah, the daily deadlines is what I was talking about, where if by 3 o'clock or so you need to get that in. So, but I'm saying for entrepreneurs, startups, and people who are pitching, who are watching this, if they want to get in tomorrow's paper, definitely get it in the morning.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're just a few minutes out, and I know that I think the session turns off itself when we go over. I'm not sure. So I want to let you guys have any last thoughts, if there's anything I didn't touch on. Otherwise, I just want to make sure I get the chance to thank each of you for being here, sharing wonderful advice. It's very helpful to people to make them better storytellers, and then thank everybody who joined us. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, Ashley, appreciate it, and thanks for everyone who joined in. Like I said, my number and email I just dropped in the chat. You can call or text me, or send me an email.
You guys are about to get a slew of tech pitches.
Well, good. That way I know I'm alive.
Yeah. Thank you guys for being so open to sharing your information as well.
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I hope people learn from this, and I don't want to speak for the other two, but I assume we are reachable. Anyone who needs any advice whatsoever, feel free to reach out. And I for one, will help as much as I can.
You guys won't bite, huh?
Nope.
Not you.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to let that be a wrap then. And everybody, please enjoy the rest of Digital Orlando. Stop by our booth if you want to say hi to me and even get some additional insight on some of these topics from here. But thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
See y'all.
Bye.
Here.